China may be softening its position in the trade war with the United States. Beijing is said to be evaluating an American offer to negotiate. This comes as a new round of auto tariffs goes into effect. Here's ABC senior White House correspondent Selena Wei.
There were demonstrators in the largest city in China who were expressing their disapproval of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as Xi Jinping.
For the first time since President Trump slapped steep tariffs on goods from China, tonight new signs they may be open to negotiations with the White House. Beijing says it's evaluating possible trade talks after senior U.S. officials reached out through relevant parties multiple times.
As things continue to spiral out of control in China, just 2 weeks ago, we witnessed the installation of pro-democracy banners in a major city in China, and now riots are breaking out all across the country. In fact, things got so out of hand in one location that we had a protester kill a CCP official, and the public was applauding the death of the official. We received a comment from a Chinese individual who stated publicly that immoral deeds committed by the CCP will provoke public reaction when the economy is in a difficult state. Comments such as this are providing Xi Jinping with cause for concern since they pose a danger to the rule of the CCP.
But Beijing insists Trump's staggering 145% tariffs must be eliminated first.
This humiliation was a direct result of the Chinese mortgage issue, which has only gotten worse since the beginning of the tariff war. When we were in China the last time, we produced a documentary about the mortgage problem that the country was experiencing and the demonstrations that were taking place as a result of it. Within a few hours of the video being uploaded, it was demonetized and prevented from being viewed. That did not make any sense to us at all. How come? This is due to the fact that we discussed demonstrations in a variety of countries. In addition, for some reason, this particular video was the one that was distracting, as opposed to the others. More than a year after we uploaded the video, YouTube came to the conclusion that it had made a mistake and decided to remove the restrictions that had been placed on our film and begin monetizing it. Due to the fact that we are discussing the same topic today, we have a sense that this video might also be limited and demonetized in the future. So, if you guys are able to assist us by clicking the like and subscribe buttons that are located below, as well as sharing this video on your various social media platforms, then we will not have to rely on the YouTube algorithm. I would like to briefly discuss the demonstrations for democracy that took place in China just 2 weeks ago before we move on to discussing the current situation in the mortgage market. With that being said, this event took place on April 15th or possibly April 14th, which is approximately 2 weeks ago. And this is the report. The words, "Without political system reform, there will be no national rejuvenation," were written on massive banners that were hanging from an elevated bridge in Chengdu, China. These banners demanded that political change be implemented. It is not necessary for the people to have a political party that has unchecked authority. The Chinese government does not require anyone to point out the way forward. This is the path that should be taken. One of the protesters who was responsible for this courageous move tweeted a photograph of the incident before he was taken away against his will. We now know additional information about the protester, but those of you who are reading this can make your own assumptions about what that means. Now, however, let us conclude this report before we go on to the next topic. He disclosed that he had spent the entire year getting ready for this moment, and he was committed to ensuring that it would be witnessed and remembered, regardless of the consequences. His last words, which he said before all communication was lost, were, "All I wish for is for Russia to have democracy." People from other countries do not comprehend the bravery that is required to achieve this. When it comes to suffering at the hands of the CCP, no one suffers more than the Chinese people. It appears like they are finally making their voices heard. In just a moment, we will discuss a story that Chinese young people have taken to social media platforms in China, which are subject to a high level of censorship. and have directly called out Xi Jinping. But before we get to that, I would like to devote a little bit more time to discussing the locations where these banners were hung. It is clear that the city was selected in a very good manner. Chengdu is the same city that TikTok influencers from the United States always ooh and ah from and tell themselves and everyone else that they are not familiar with the real China. As a result, I would like to bring to your attention the fact that, just like any other nation, the true version of itself is composed of numerous variants. People in an authoritarian country are not permitted to publicly criticize the versions of a country that the government doesn't want you to see. This highlights the difference between the two types of countries. But every once in a while, we are reminded that there is a great deal going on beneath the surface that people choose to remain silent about. At this point, it would appear that the Chinese people are beginning to express their opinions, and this demonstration was just the beginning. Nevertheless, before we move on to other demonstrations, let us take a look at what we know about this activist. Before I go ahead and read this article, I would like to make it clear to everyone who might be concerned that the protester in question is already being held by the Chinese Communist Party. Because of this, we are not placing him in danger by divulging his photograph. As a matter of fact, this picture has already been making its way around social media platforms in China. Millie Xinglin, a Sichuan native resident who is 27 years old, is the activist who is responsible for hanging the banners above the flyover in Chengdu. As far as he is concerned, these banners have been created for a period of 1 year. He was involved in a labor dispute with Shenzhen Board Vision Xinjuan Technology prior to the action being taken. The staff members passed the buck in a number of different ways while they were in the process of filing a complaint with the Labor Inspection Department. The situation was so complicated that he even hung up the phone before he could finish discussing it. Now, this may appear to be a little problem, but we must acknowledge that this was most likely one of the many things that are bothering the Chinese populace. And this is what caused him to go over the edge. Recall the Arab Spring that occurred throughout the Middle East. A produce vendor in Tunisia had his cart taken away by the authorities, and when he went on to complain about it, they simply laughed him off. This is where the situation began. In order to demonstrate his disapproval of the dictatorial administration, he decided to set himself on fire. Within a few weeks after this event, the government was overthrown. Again, this is not to predict that something like that will occur in China, but it is important to keep in mind that the majority of large-scale demonstrations begin as relatively minor events. Furthermore, it appears that this is already taking place in China. Another young person has taken to the public forum to express their dissatisfaction with the manner in which Xi Jinping is handling the ongoing trade war.
China's Commerce Ministry says if the U.S. doesn't, it means that the United States has no sincerity at all and will further damage the mutual trust between both sides.
Their troubles do not end there, which is unfortunate for the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. If you have been following the channel, you are aware that we have been discussing the fact that China's economy is not sustainable. And this discussion has been going on even before the terror force was established. What you need to understand is that China has been experiencing the mortgage issue. To put it simply, the situation for the CCP has not significantly improved. The Chinese people are still very unhappy about the way in which the authorities of the Communist Party of China have messed up their future. Observers can be seen here demonstrating against construction projects that have not yet been completed.
Starting today, Trump's 25% tariffs on most car parts go into effect.
At the government office of the Diabei Economics Development Zone in Guangdong, owners of unfinished structures were both attacked and arrested by police for defending their rights. The incident took place at the government office. Due to the fact that the property is not yet built, they have initiated as many as 30 rights protection cases, yet they have not yet made any headway. Owners gathered outside the gate of the development zone building. blocking the gate that the government uses, and yelling slogans such as, "Give me back my house" and "Down with the profiteers." The video that was taken on site reveals all that took place. Now, as I indicated before, this has been going on for about 20 years now. However, the issue became much worse a few years ago, and it has continued to get worse ever since then. You see, tariffs are not helping because people are losing their jobs, and the few savings they did have were invested in real estate. This is the reason why tariffs are not helping, mostly due to the fact that while individuals lived in China, real estate was one of the few things they could invest in. How come? Because the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, owns a significant number of the most successful businesses. It is not in the best interest of the leaders of the CCP to put this on the public market, since doing so would require them to distribute the money to the people of China. The majority of the businesses are therefore entirely owned by the state. This indicates that the general people do not receive any benefits from the success of Chinese enterprises. It is for this reason that the majority of Chinese citizens invest in real estate. It is as if they are buying one house after another. It should come as no surprise that there are also certain cultural factors at play here. Families in China prepare for their retirement by investing in real estate as a means of saving money. Individuals who are single and possess real estate are regarded as desirable candidates for marriage, and the amount of real estate that you own is directly proportional to the social status that you hold in the society. When all of this is taken into consideration, it is easy to understand why real estate prices in China have been steadily climbing for the better part of the past 2 decades. It is true that this contributed to the cycle in some way. After it became clear to everyone that the value of real estate would continue to rise, families began purchasing real estate in greater quantities because they desired to share in the profits that were being made. The developers were selling out complexes before they had even begun construction, since the demand for housing was so high that they were unable to fulfill the demand. On the other hand, even after the construction was completed, the flats remained vacant throughout the entire process because they had owners but no residents. Many people were interested in purchasing their second, third, or fourth property, which led to a high level of demand. They simply desired to amass wealth through the current real estate bubble. Despite the fact that the supply had significantly expanded to meet the demand, a significant number of these properties were left unoccupied because their owners had merely purchased them in the expectation that their prices would climb. Real estate accounted for around 70% of the wealth held by Chinese families, according to a data set from the year 2022. 70%. You read that correctly. My guess is that diversification is not really important. Imagine for a moment that the real estate market was to experience some kind of event. To begin, this is the point at which we discuss Evergrande. Once upon a time, it was the most successful real estate developer in China. The fact of the matter is that in the year 2018, they were the most successful real estate company in the entirety of Asia. As a result, when people see something that is so large, they just think that it is all authentic. The majority of the time, however, this is not the case. In 2008, we in the United States of America were able to learn that lesson. On the other hand, the Chinese investors learned that lesson with Evergrande. If one had peered under the hood, they would have seen it. They would have realized that some of the activities that the company was carrying out were not precisely acceptable if they had the opportunity to peer beneath the hood prior to the catastrophe. Permit me to expand. Remember how I indicated earlier that I was referring to the fear of missing out, often known as FOMO? Houses were being purchased by individuals even before construction had begun. Consequently, a firm such as Evergrande would typically lease a piece of property from the local government. This is due to the fact that land is not something that can be purchased in China. The corporation would then turn around and sell the houses that were meant to be built on that land, and they would collect full payment for the houses before they even began construction on the residences. There would never be any problems for businesses in terms of selling out since the demand was simply so strong. People were more than happy to take out mortgages and purchase homes in the expectation that they would one day be able to call themselves homeowners. At this point, the most significant issue that arises is the fact that businesses such as Evergrande would not actually put the money that they obtained from the sale towards the beginning of the construction process. They would not use that money for that purpose. Rather, they would use it as a down payment to lease even more land in order to sell even more dwelling units in the future. I have high hopes that you are beginning to recognize the issue at this point. A portion of the funds that were intended to be used for the construction of the homes are now being used to purchase additional land. That being said, where exactly is Evergrande going to get the funds to actually construct the homes that they have already sold? With that being said, Evergrande had the expectation that the pyramid scheme would go on indefinitely. However, we are aware from elementary mathematics that it is not even remotely possible for a pyramid scheme to continue on indefinitely. The fact of the matter is that you just run out of people who are willing to sign up for your program. Regulators in China ought to have discovered this long before it became such a significant problem. Nevertheless, this is the point at which we need to discuss the second problem. You have to understand that the local governments were directly benefiting from the real estate pyramid scams that were being run by businesses such as Evergrande. One of the most significant ways in which local governments in China generate revenue is by leasing out land to individuals and companies such as Evergrande. The result of this was that the bids placed on the land that the government was leasing out increased in proportion to the amount of risk that these real estate businesses were willing to take on. By leasing out lands, the local government was able to generate almost 50% of its revenue. The very government that was supposed to be safeguarding its population from these potentially dangerous habits was, in fact, directly benefiting heavily from these practices that were considered to be dangerous. An excellent illustration of a perverse incentive is this situation. In addition, this was one of the primary reasons why the real estate bubble in China eventually became so large. The news that YouTube has just made is really mind-boggling. $64 million are being paid out to creators on a daily basis. How come? Due to the fact that YouTube does not currently have a sufficient number of creators. This is the reason why you see videos on your homepage that have fewer than 1,000 views, such as the one you are interested in. It goes without saying that this does not imply that everyone should launch their own channel. On the other hand, if you have ever considered beginning a YouTube channel or a nameless channel, the moment is right for you to explore the possibility. Creators on YouTube are receiving millions of dollars every single day, and the platform is promoting newer and smaller channels more than it ever has before. However, I am certain that you have a lot of questions on how to launch and develop a channel. It is not uncommon for some of you to send me emails with questions like these on the topic. Because of this, we have made the decision to compile all of the YouTube teachings into a single training boot camp that is offered at no cost. You may sign up for this boot camp by clicking the link in the description or by using the QR code that is displayed on your screen. If you are someone who is interested in beginning your own YouTube channel, you can go ahead and sign up. The number of participants in this boot camp is restricted to a maximum of 100 at any given time. Therefore, make sure you sign up before the space is completely filled. Now, let us return to the video. In spite of the fact that it was directly beneficial to them, regulators were always sluggish to initiate action. After that, when the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, did finally intervene with its 3 red line policy, it was too little, too late. Property developers had already sold millions of homes, but they were unable to construct any of them because they lacked the funds to do so. This is the reason why we continue to witness demonstrations in China that are similar to this one. It would appear that one of these demonstrations did, in fact, result in a fatality. The petitioners who were standing on an island at the entrance of the sub-district office were responsible for the murder of the secretary of the Aigua sub-district, which is located in the Xinjiang district of Guangdong province. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has censored a significant number of reports concerning this tragedy, and the ones that I was able to locate were written in Chinese. Since I am going to be using Google Translate, I ask that you please excuse me if I make any mistakes. Furthermore, according to the findings of my investigation, it appears that this was in connection with the compensation that the CCP was obliged to provide to petitioners whose homes were destroyed. It would appear, however, that this particular officer of the CCP was involved in the process of silencing the petitioners and ensuring that they do not receive payment. My guess is that there was some form of corruption involved. On the 17th of April, one of the petitioners who was upset waited outside the office, and when he saw the official, that is when the incident took place. Despite the fact that this was a shocking event, I did not consider it to be the most shocking aspect of the beating that took place. The reaction that the general population had was the cause. According to a report that was uploaded to YouTube, it appears that the Chinese people were cheering this beating. They were saying that it must have been a CCP official who pushed this guy to his limits, and that the officials enjoy making life difficult for the people. In one comment, the author went so far as to place all of the responsibility on the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, stating that when the economy is in a difficult state, the CCP's wicked deeds will provoke public revenge. At this point, I would like to discuss yet another foolish choice that the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has made since the beginning of this trade war. The story of Xi Jinping's decision to prohibit Chinese airlines from purchasing Boeing aircraft, while at the same time he himself flies Boeing aircraft, is one of my particular favorites. In response, Xi suggests that all of these Chinese airlines should purchase the aircraft manufactured by Comac, which is a Chinese company, as well as the C-919 airbody jet, which is China's flagship model. If you are wondering why they do not purchase from the Chinese manufacturer, I have a wonderful explanation for you. In this particular instance, we had a Chinese 919 that actually landed on farmland. The fact that Xi Jinping travels in a Boeing could be due to this particular reason.